All right, so we're gonna get into it, man. The title of the class for today is called "The Art of Communication." The art of communication. Why? Because in my observation, there's a lot of communicating that we need to do in the truth, but there's a lack of that, in some ways, And so, what I want to do is I want to go through some of the negative traits that we have, and then some of the positive things that we need to do in order to be better communicating, better communicators. Because there's three types of phases. When it comes to communication, you have the no communication, you have communication, and then you have effective communication. So we gotta get on that effective communication level, and so that's what I want to kind of talk about today. Because it's everyone against the Israelites. We're by ourselves in this thing, so we got to make sure if we're going to bring forth the kingdom, we got to make sure that we're communicating correctly. All right.
Can I say something real quick before you get into the meat of it?
Yes.
Israel, pay attention. Put down any distractions. If you're one of those type of people that's watching this class on your phone and you tend to get out of the class so you can scroll through your Facebook, get on the computer. Get rid of the distractions. Put the kids up, get them settled where they need to be at, because communication is what really can either help our nation or hurt our nation. So we need to really pay attention to what Elder Yachin is about to go into, and so that we can progress. All right.
Right. All praises. Yeah. And we gotta, we just gotta figure out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Because a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, communication. Why are you going over that topic? That's an easy topic. I know how to communicate. I know how to talk, but it goes a little bit deeper. You know what I mean? Just like you have Titus 2, when it talks about the women the older women are supposed to teach the younger women how to love their husbands. That's not natural, So that's something that has to be taught. Communication has to be taught because we haven't learned these things in our public school systems and things like that. Right? Our parents haven't learned it, and they haven't taught it to us. So we gotta learn it through the Bible. All right. So let's start out with Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21.
It's the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof.
All right. So death and life are in the power of the tongue. So what that's telling you is that the tongue is very powerful. All right. So it's so powerful that life and death are within the words that come out of your mouth. All right. So it just depends on what side you're on. Are you on the life side or are you on the death side? All right. And you can use your words to do different things. So you can use your words to uplift, to bring together, to resolve issues, or you can use your words to tear down, to divide, right? To stir up issues among brethren. Okay. So what we got to realize is that we're in a spiritual war, all right? And the most dangerous weapon that you can use in that war is your tongue, all right? But you can use it to defeat your enemies, all right? Or you can use it to destroy your own, or what they call friendly fire in the military, right? So if the tongue is a weapon, right, we have to understand how to use it and how to use it properly. Remember when David was fighting Goliath, right? David and Saul gave him his weaponry. He gave him his shield and everything. David was like, I can't use this. I got to prove it, right? So you got to prove your tongue, all right? You got to make sure you understand how to use it properly, and that's what we're going to go into today. We're going to talk about some of those negative traits in terms of communication, and then the positive traits in order to build better communication, as I spoke on before. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 26, verse 17. Because one of the first traits that's negative that we gotta stop doing is sarcasm. Okay. So what sarcasm is it's an ironic statement. Okay, but it's meant to mock. It's meant to ridicule another person. Okay. So when you look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it says it's designed to cut or to give pain. That's what sarcasm does, okay? And a lot of us use that in different ways, and that's what we're going to go into with this scripture. But with sarcasm, there's a cruel and insulting element to it, all right? And so let's go into the scripture to talk about that a little bit more. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 17.
It's the book of Proverbs, chapter 26, verse 17. He that passeth by and meddle with strife belongeth not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears.
Okay, so first and foremost, there's gonna be people who pass by and engage in situations involving strife, and it's not even their own issue. First and foremost, those type of people are always gonna find themselves in some type of drama in some type of way, because they're attracted to it. It wasn't even their issue, but because they hear the drama, now it's like, oh, I gotta give in to it. Now I gotta get myself into it. But it says that is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. So when you take a dog by the ears, what happens? You're going to get bit. Yep. Okay? So meaning what? You got to mind your own business, first and foremost. You can't always be worrying about what somebody else is doing. You can't always be worried about what the tea is, you know? That's not how you're supposed to operate.
And the way the Lord described it is like, think about it. It's something unnecessary.
Yes.
Like for you just to walk by and grab a dog by its ears is very unnecessary. There's plenty other ways you could have grabbed the dog, but you choose to grab it by its ears.
Exactly.
So God is showing you that you meddling in something you don't got no business meddling in is unnecessary.
It definitely is. It's very unnecessary, and it's not going to be to your benefit. It's going to be to your detriment at the end of the day, you know. And honestly, that'll be the same reason why, you know, those people's lives are in shambles, right? Those people's lives are not in order like it should be according to the scriptures, you know, because they're too busy meddling in other people's matters rather than fixing their own stuff, you know, fixing what's at home. All right. So read on.
Verse 18. As a madman who casted firebrands, arrows, and death.
So firebrands, arrows, and death, they're all very, very destructive. Okay. So just as a man of war that will cast these things out to defeat the enemy, read.
So is a man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, am I not in sport?
It's just like the man that tricks his neighbor by using sarcasm and saying, oh, I was just joking. Right. Oh, you know, brother, I'm just a comedian on the block, right? So people love to hide behind jokes, all right? And, you know, we'll say, oh, I'm just joking and that sort of thing. But in reality, there's truth behind what we're actually saying. You know, the feelings that we have are actually reality, okay? So we can't do that because what we're really doing is we're magnifying ourselves to someone else's detriment, all right, to someone else's expense, all right? We can't do that. So what you do is you come off as a comedian, but, you know, at the same time, the people that are witnessing it are watching you cast down your friend. You know, they're watching you put down your brother or sister, okay? So your words and your tone of voice, they communicate the wrong thing to people. Or it can communicate that tension and that hostility that is actually within you, but it's just not out in the open, okay? So what we got to do is we just got to be upfront. We got to be honest with ourselves. We got to be honest with the people that we have issues with, and let them know how you feel from the jump rather than hiding it, and then it starts to grow into something else that you can't control at the end of the day.
Man, and that thing about sarcasm, man, it's like, it's messed up because somebody could tell you something harsh or hurtful in a harsh or hurtful way. Yep. And then you can react a certain type of way, but when somebody's fly with it when they use sarcasm, it's like if they use sarcasm in front of other people, like you said, am I not in sport? Right. Then if you was to react like if they said it a harsh way,
yeah, bring it out.
Everybody around you would be like, bro, why'd you react like that?
Exactly.
He was just playing. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like when you get that thrown at you, it's like, oh, you know what you were saying.
Exactly.
And you just put me on the spot where I can't react how I want to react. Right. Because you was all in sport.
Exactly. And that's that friendly fire that I was talking about, because that person knows. They know what they're doing. They know, okay, if I bring it out this way in front of these people, they can't say nothing to me because everybody else is on my team. Everybody else thinks that, you know, I'm just joking when I'm really trying to, you know, cast them down. All right. That's that friendly fire that I was talking about. This is war, man. And sometimes our own people be the ones that's throwing those darts at us. All right. So sarcasm. Let's stop doing that. All right. Another one, being passive aggressive. All right. I'm just getting right into this thing. Like,
Get
I'm
into
not,
it.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I just got to get into it because it's a lot of things that we do that are not beneficial to us and in terms of growing a nation, you know? All right. So let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 28. So first and foremost, being passive aggressive. A passive aggressive person is one that appears to agree, appears to comply with the request, but actually resist it in subtle ways. Okay, so the resistance can range from you pouting, or it can be a delayed vindictiveness. All right, so we all exhibit that passive aggressiveness in some way, especially when we were kids, because we couldn't just openly rebel. We couldn't openly be like, nah, I'm not doing that. Right. So we did something passive aggressively to disagree with it, to show that we disagree with it. But now, as we're older, as we're adults, as we put away those childish things, there has to be another way that we go about that. Okay, so this is a good example here. We're talking about in the scripture, King David's son Absalom. All right, he's an example of somebody that was passive aggressive, you know, because what happened was he murdered his brother, Amnon. David banished him from the kingdom. He said, you cannot come back. Now, once he was able to actually return, what happened was David still didn't want to deal with them. So what Absalom did was he sent for Joab, the commander of the army, to tell him, hey, look, I want to speak to David. You know, let me get to David. All right. So that's kind of where we're at in the story right now. All right, so let's read 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 28.
2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 28. So Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem and saw not the king's face.
Read.
Therefore Absalom sent for Joab to have sent him to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he would not come.
So Absalom, like I said, he sent for Joab, the commander of David's army, to say, hey, look, let me see King David. I want to see my father. So he sent for him twice, and Joab did not come. Read.
Therefore he said unto his servants, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he hath barley. There, go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire.
Man, do you see the extent, first of all, that the brother went to? And that's something that you got to realize right there. Like, when you got somebody that you know, is vindictive, they'll go to any length to get what they want. All right. The brother just set Joab's field on fire. You know how upset I would be?
Yeah.
Bruh. All right. So look at the extent that he went to in order to finally get Joab to come.
It's like on next Friday when Daddy didn't want to come outside.
Yeah.
See out there, he was like, Daddy, see out there again.
Yep.
Key in his car. He didn't want to talk to her.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? She was like, you're not going to quit me.
Exactly.
So she had to get in his car to get him to come.
That's a great example. They're in modern day. There you go. All right, read on.
Verse 30. Therefore he said unto his servants, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he hath barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire.
Read.
Then Joab arose and came to Absalom unto his house, and said unto him, wherefore have thy servants set my field on fire?
Bro, why you set my field on fire? Read.
And Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent unto thee, saying, come hither, that I may send thee to the king, to say, wherefore am I come from Geshur?
Mm-hmm.
It hath been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore, let me see the king's face, and if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me.
All right. So when he finally gets to see Joab, when Joab comes and he says, look, why did you set my field on fire? Absalom's like, look, why did I even come from Geshur? You know, like, I'm here to see my father. I'm here to see the king. He's like, look, I haven't been able to see him for this long. He's like, look, if I do something, if there's some sin or some iniquity in me and you guys see it, just kill me. Just put me to death. All right. Read on.
Verse 33. So Joab came to the king and told him. And when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. And the king kissed Absalom.
Now notice this. When he finally saw the king, look how he postured himself. He he humbles himself in the face of the king, right? As if there was no issue at all, as if everything's perfect, okay? But secretly, he's holding a grudge within himself. Secretly, he has hatred for his father, okay? So, you know, you got to watch those spirits, man, you know, and that's why I love reading these scriptures, because the Most High just has us mapped out perfectly in terms of what type of spirits that we have. Just because it was thousands of years ago doesn't mean that those spirits are not still on the earth.
And that's the thing that Israel needs to understand. Like, we like watching all these, like, Power. You like watching
Bring it out.
Empire and all these shows. You'll focus on that, but you'll put the Bible to the side.
Right.
When a lot of the stories that they show come
It
out
comes
of the
straight from
Bible.
this.
You see all that. You see a son going against the father.
Yep.
Father going against the son. You see all that stuff. That's how you know we the Israelites. The Bible speaks to us.
That's right, most definitely. You look at Godfather and all those stories, it comes straight from here. All right. So let's jump to the next chapter, 2 Samuel chapter 15. We're going to read verse 1 through 11.
2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 1. And it came to pass after this, that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses, and 50 men to run before him.
Read.
And Absalom rose up early, and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so, that when any man that had controversy came to the king for judgment, that Absalom called unto him, and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel.
Okay, so now look at the tactics once again. Okay, so he put himself in the midst of everyone, in the midst of everyone else. He wakes up early in the morning, stands at the front of the gate in the front of the city, you know, and if anyone has an issue, if anyone has a complaint, if anyone has something that's going on with them, he hears the issue. Okay? You know, he gets close to him. He builds a relationship with them. All right. And he asks, what city you from? All right. So he postures himself as a good guy, even though secretly within him, there's that hatred there. Read.
Verse 3. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man depute of the king to hear thee.
So he hears the complaint. He says, look, I hear what you're saying, you know, and your complaints are very valid. You know, I understand what you're saying, brother. I understand what you're saying, sister. You know, but the problem is there's nobody that's assigned, you know, to actually deal with the issue that you have. You know, read. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, brothers and sisters do that to this day.
Right now, bro. Right
Y'all
now.
got to see these things, Israel. Brothers and sisters will do that to this day.
Yes.
You thinking that they really care about you, but they got ulterior motives into why they're doing that.
For sure. For sure. Absolutely. Read on.
Verse 4. Absalom said, Moreover, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which have any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice.
So if only I were a judge, though. If only I was a leader, you know, I would make sure people's matters were heard. Yep. I would make sure people would get the judgment that they deserve. Read.
Verse 5. And it was so, that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand, and took him and kissed him.
So when any man came to give him respect, to give to maybe like salute him or something like that, right? Absalom would be the first to put forth his hand. He would kiss the other man, you know, showing that humility, all right, gaining that popularity amongst the people, all right. So Absalom was very charismatic outwardly. All right, that's one of his characteristics, but inwardly he was very crafty, and he operated under his own secret mission to first undermine his father, the king, and then obtain the kingdom as his own. All right, read on.
And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel.
So he did this to everyone that came to the city for judgment. So he stole the hearts of the people from David. He got them on his side because outwardly he looked as if he was someone who was for the king, but secretly he was trying to take them away from the king so he could have a team to himself. All right, read on.
And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron.
So this man did this thing for 40 years. That's how serious he was about his secret mission. Now, once again, you gotta analyze that in terms of the friends and the people that you have in your circle, right? You got to understand that some people are in this thing for the long haul, in terms of carrying out their secret mission. All right. So you got to understand that it might not just be that, okay, in a year or two, now you see the secret plot.
Right.
It could be years. All right. Read on.
Verse 8, for thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord.
Read.
And the king said unto him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron.
So Absalom's plot was to become the king. So what he said was, look, when you hear the sound of the trumpet and I'm in Hebron, everybody say, hey, look, hey, Absalom's the king. Man, read on.
And when Absalom went, 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything.
So 200 men went out to Jerusalem and followed exactly what Absalom said. And they did it in their simplicity. They were simple. All right. So you got to be careful who you follow and who you attach yourself to, because you could end up being one of those simple ones, just like those 200 men. Because like I said, they were following him blindly. They didn't fact check to say, hold up, is this what really should be happening? Let me check with the king. Let me check with some of his advisors to just make sure. They didn't do none of that. Right. They just said, okay, well, I guess this is what it is, so let me just follow.
And the reason why they're simple as well, because you got to think this is a kingdom. Yes. Let's not be foolish, Israel, to think that back then they ruled in the capacity that we ruled in, where you just got a kingdom and ain't nothing established.
Right.
You got order and structure established. Yes. So for them to be like, they got to think like, why is Absalom now interceding in what's going on before? Right. Because they allowed his words. Oh, yeah, see, there's nobody to look for your matters. They had somebody to look for their matters.
Yes.
But he was just telling them what they wanted to hear,
exactly.
Stroking their ego. So it's like, okay, so that's what happened now.
Yep.
Brothers will sit up amongst you. Oh, there's nobody to hear your matters, when really there is.
Yep.
They stroke your ego a little bit, and then before you know it, when the time is right, let's bounce, y'all.
That's it. That's it. And that's why it's just so important to examine yourself, right? Examine the spirit that you have on yourself, and then examine the people that are around you in your circle. All right? Because this is the thing. Everybody wants to be David. Everybody wants to be Moses. Everybody wants to be Paul in the spirit. You know what I mean? But nobody, but at the end of the day, nobody wants to make sure they don't have that Absalom spirit. Make sure they don't have the Nabal spirit, the Judas spirit on them, But, just because somebody is likable or they're entertaining or whatever the case may be, doesn't mean that they have the right spirit on them.
And then there's those no-name spirits where you just fall into 200 men.
Yeah, exactly.
You one of these 200 men. You ain't got no name written in the Bible, but it describes 200 people that were simple and followed them. Don't be that.
Exactly. Go ahead.
It's a couple of things that you just brought out there through that scripture that I really want to call out and make sure that we pay close attention to. And you already did it a little bit, but I just want to push it a little bit more.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you have a person who will sit up and intercede and say, I'm going to act on behalf of the leadership, if you will, to be the one to hear your matters because they don't want to hear it. Or there's no one set up to hear it. But what that does in that passive aggressiveness that we're speaking is it shows that I'm trying to make a strategic attack on what is already set up. Yes. And since I can't outwardly defeat you, I'll do it sneakily. Is that a word, sneakily? Covertly, thank you. So I like the word sneakily. I think y'all should add that to the dictionary.
Put it on a t-shirt.
But that's a very strong tactic, and that communicates a lot. That communicates what kind of person that you really are. That communicates, and when you see that type of person, you got to take note of that. That's the kind of moves that they make, and it's going to happen over and over again in their lives. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side, you got the people who fell for it, the simple people, who were sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, there is no one to hear my matter." Now, be mindful. it's a king. It's a whole kingship set up. This is not just some little small organization that, don't really have anybody with experience in position or doesn't have enough team behind them. No, this is a whole kingdom with full order and structure set up. We're one of the greatest kings that we have notable in our Bible. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we don't have anyone to hear our matter. That's showing you exactly what kind of person that is. Because that's a person who got something to say but ain't willing to say it. Right. If you really felt that way, then why didn't you go and explain it and bring it forth, and maybe it could be addressed if it was necessary to be addressed. But what I find in common time is a lot of times there's nothing to be addressed. You don't actually have anything to say. You're looking for an out, but you don't have what it takes to stand up and say those things in front of somebody. So you're looking for someone to give you a way out, looking for someone that you can ride behind and say, see, yeah, we all in the same agreement. You've been in that thought process for a while, but weren't strong enough to say it. So now someone else is, even in their passive aggressiveness, they're stronger than you are in being able to say what they have to say. So these are the kind of people that we read about in that biblical time, but we see them right here in 2020. Mm-hmm. And for people who are really going to listen to what you're saying, if they're going to take heed to it, you got to ask yourself, am I one of these people? Did I do that because I fit into the 200 or because I'm an Absalom type spirit? Which one am I?
That's on point for sure. I appreciate you for, commenting on that thing, because that's the truth. You have to analyze those things. Who are you within the scripture? Are you a brother or sister that will do the research and will ask certain questions to make sure that you're operating in order, in the right capacity? Or are you one of these 200? Are you one of the simple people who just follow blindly, or like you said, are looking for that way out? Because that is what happens sometimes. You're disgruntled in a certain way, but you just don't have the wherewithal or the cojones, let me just say, to bring it out. So now you look for somebody else that has a little bit more power than you, a little bit more influence than you, and then now all of a sudden, now I'm riding with them. This is my way out.
And one thing I wonder, right, again, like we said, this was a kingdom that was established and order was set up. Yeah. I'm pretty sure there's some people that wasn't talked about that understood that, no, Absalom ain't supposed to be interceding like he interceded.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? There's already structure set up. Why are y'all going to Absalom?
Right.
So, again, it's focusing on those people that, yeah, I see Absalom stroking egos. Right. I may have had a problem with what the king is doing, so cool, yeah, I'm gonna let Absalom do this thing for 40 years. Mm-hmm. So you just got to see those little things in the scriptures. And
most definitely, man. And I'm glad you said that, because not only that, is once again, as it's been brought up a couple of times in this conversation, this is a kingdom. You know what I'm saying? This isn't just a small organization where, maybe things are not established the way you would like for them to be. This is a whole kingdom right here. Mm-hmm. Right? And the thing is that these people knew what Absalom did prior to this. They knew he had killed his brother. They knew he wasn't on anything good at the time. They knew he was cast out by the king, right? But yet and still, they still said, you know what, I'm gonna follow him. So that shows what spirit they were already in from the jump. Okay, so that's just something y'all got to think about. But I just want you to realize how passive aggressive this man was, though. At the end of the day, he secretly had hatred for his father. He plotted to take the kingdom from him, and he did so by putting on the appearance that he actually cared for the people. All right, and not only that, he posed himself as being compassionate to the people and having concern for the people. Not only that, he hinted that his father wasn't even paying attention to the people. That's how passive aggressive he was. He did all of that to take the kingdom from his father. All right. So, all in all, being passive aggressive, that's actually more dangerous than somebody that's openly aggressive, right? Because you don't see the attack coming. right? But you got to look at the scriptures as we're looking at them to analyze what type of spirit that is, so you can see it before it actually happens.
And Absalom was sly because remember what he told Joab?
Mm-hmm.
If there's any sin,
Right.
kill me.
And then he humbled himself.
He humbled
right
himself,
there.
knew what he was finna do. I'm finna do something so sneaky and sly. You not even
Yep.
gonna see it.
Not even gonna see it for 40 years, man. That's crazy, you know. And that's a part of that negative side that we have. Like we've been saying, this is something that happens modern day. This is not just something that happens that happened in the Bible. We can look right now and say, that's that spirit. All right.
Everything written aforetime was written for our learning.
For our learning.
That we through pages of the scriptures might have hope. Meaning, if we seeing these things through David's time, it's coming back around again. Otherwise, we wouldn't need it to be written down.
Right.
So we're on the lookout.
Exactly. There's some Absalom spirits out there. All right. There's some Nabal spirits out there. There's some Judah spirits out there, like I said. You know? All right.
And that's the last thing. And that's
Go
the
ahead.
heavy test because, remember, we got the fringes, we got the Sabbath, we got all these things. But again, were you able to be aware of that Absalom spirit? Right. Will you be aware of all these different things? Everything written aforetime was written for our learning. The test is coming back around. We got to open the book, study the whole thing, and apply it as it comes in our life.
Absolutely. And think about, like you said, in terms of judgment, think about those 200 that followed him. Everything we just brought up, knowing what Absalom did prior to this particular moment, not asking questions, not inquiring, understanding that there was a structure, but believing that there wasn't based off what Absalom said, falling for his trickery, right? All of that. Imagine what type of judgment those type of people are going to get. All right. So you could be one of those. So you gotta make sure that you on the right side of things. All right. So another characteristic that we have, or a tactic that we have in terms of that negative side of communication, is diversion. All right. So I'm not going to go into a scripture with this, but basically what it is instead of dealing with how both parties are feeling at that particular time, what you'll do is one party will start to go down a list of grievances that they have in past times, all right, when they felt they were done wrong, okay? So in a lot of cases, you know, the other party didn't even know that there was an issue, right? They didn't even know that there was something going on, but now that person brings it up later, and they held it in for so long, all right? So we do that in the truth. And the sad thing about it is that we do it, and we have days like the Day of Atonement, you know, where we're supposed to let all those things go. But secretly, we still hold those things within us, and then it grows, and it's a cancerous thing within us to then cause us to do God knows what. All right? So that's diversion. Denial. Denial is another thing that we do. So we insist that we aren't angry, we're not upset, nothing's wrong, everything's all good, but you really do have an issue. You really do have something that's going on within you. You know, so once again, we bottle up those emotions and then end up erupting, you know, when everyone thought that the issue was squashed. Everybody thought that the issue was okay. All right, so that causes confusion, and then it causes anger at the same time because, you know, nobody likes to have to circle back around and deal with something that they already thought was squashed. All right, so that's something that we do. You know, we spoke about that passive aggressive nature, but all these characteristics that I'm talking about, it's passive. It's all passive. All right, and you know, it takes the same amount of energy or even more energy to exhibit these characteristics than it does to just be upfront and honest, than it does to just play it the right way. You know what I'm saying? And exhibit these positive traits. But the problem is we rather exhibit the negative traits because we don't really want to have those hard conversations. You know, we don't want to face the fact that, look, I got to talk to my brother about something that's serious. You know, and it may not go the way that I want it to go. But at the end of the day, it's necessary in order to be able to squash it, in order to be able to move on in the right way. All right. So if you got love for your brother and love for your sister, you're gonna have those hard conversations. It's just gonna have to happen because that's what's going to move the needle forward rather than making it stagnant. All right. Listening. Let's move on to the positive side. This is what we need to do. We gotta listen. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, I listen. Shoot, I know how to listen.
Okay.
I'm one of the best listeners. Thou sayest. All right. Let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. Let's start there.
It's the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. Chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven.
All right. So there's a season and a time for everything. You know, sometimes it's okay to do certain things. Sometimes it's not the right season for you to go that route. All right. Now let's jump down to verse 7.
Verse 7. A time to rend and a time to sow.
So going along with verse 1, there's a time to rend, meaning there's a time to separate or split up. And then there's a time to sow, meaning a time to put together. Read.
A time to keep silence.
A time to what?
A time to keep silence.
One more time.
A time to keep silence.
And what?
And a time to speak.
Now there's also a time to keep silence. Keep silence. And then there's also a time to speak. All right. So the thing is that there always has to be a balance in everything that we do. So that keeping silence part is very, very important. Now, when you talk about listening is important because it is that second half of the communication, right? In order for someone to communicate something, someone has to be listening on the other end. All right. Otherwise, you don't have any communication whatsoever. All right. So you have something?
No, I was going to say, just when you think about the dynamics of a person's head, right? You've got two eyes, two ears, and one mouth. With your ears, you can listen attentively. Your eyes, you can see verbal, you can see physically what's going on. Right. You're assessing the whole situation, and then you speak. You say what little you need to see, or what little you need to say, or how much you need to say. But the thing is, like I said, God gave you two ears to hear and two eyes to see.
Absolutely.
So we got to think about that when it comes to conversations that we have with people. Take it all in, assess the situation, and then use our mouth to speak.
Exactly, and I'm glad you said that because that's teeing it up for what I'm about to say. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13. In terms of listening, this is something that we absolutely have to work on as a people. You know, because we got a lot of talkers. You know, we got a lot of people that express their opinion and, have certain say on certain things. Got a lot of know-it-alls and that sort of thing, but not enough listeners, okay? Not enough people to be able to communicate and for it to be effective communication. That's what we're looking for. We're not just looking for people to communicate. We're looking for effective communication, right. All right? So let's go to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13.
Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him.
Okay, so the person that tries to respond to a situation before actually hearing the other person's side of the story or hearing the whole account of the matter, the Lord is saying that person is foolish first and foremost, okay? In fact, it's a shame unto that person is what the scripture said. And the reason being is because, as the scriptures say, we're supposed to examine first and then judge. All right. So if you fail to listen before you provide your input, then you can end up looking silly, when the rest of the information actually comes out. All right. So that's why listening is so important. The scriptures tell us that listening shows that you have wisdom. The Bible is spiritual. OK, so the scriptures tell you that the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God. But the spiritual man does because they are spiritually discerned. You spiritually discern these things based off of the action that people are showing you. You can tell if people are actually following the scriptures, thus saith the Lord, based off of what you've read yourself and what you know. Right. Okay? So you can tell how spiritual someone is by how well they listen. Now, that's what the scriptures say. And it's not that everybody's perfect. We're all striving to be perfect. We're all working on these things together. All right. But we need to work on them. That's the thing. Okay. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is something that every person should be making improvements on as you are going along in your life. If you say you love your neighbor, then guess what? You got to start listening.
Absolutely.
You got to start listening. All right. So, and this is the thing, you know that you wouldn't want someone else to jump to conclusions on you. You know, if you were expressing yourself, you wouldn't want somebody to say, you know, to jump to conclusions and say, oh, this brother wicked because he said this in this sentence. Mm-hmm. But you're not even listening to the whole rest of the story.
Right.
Okay.
That make people want to shut down.
Exactly. It definitely does. All right. So a lot of times the thing is, though, when that person is interrupting, they're not trying to solve the situation, right? They're not trying to get to the root of the issue. Their motive is to just express themselves, you know, to get their point across. All right. And that's something that we got to stop doing. All right. So let's jump up to verse 2. Let's see what that says.
Proverbs 18 and verse 2. A fool have no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself.
All right. So the Lord is revealing that one of the reasons why some people don't listen, he says, a fool doesn't delight or take pleasure in trying to gain understanding from the other party. Okay. Their goal is not to hear the other person or even to resolve the situation whatsoever. Okay. Their sole purpose is to go after their own personal lust.
Or look at it like this, depending on what the topic, say it's marriage, right?
Yep.
Man, I got an issue with marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you tell them before you start talking.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already coming up with the solution that they're going to give you in their mind.
Right.
Without really knowing what part of your marriage you really want the solution in.
Yes, yes.
So you start talking, give them a little tip, and then they throw it out there, and you're like, that's not even what I'm dealing with.
Exactly.
Well, that was only a part of it. Let me get to the rest of it.
Right.
So that we can actually get the solution. That's what then makes them look foolish because
Yes.
you didn't wait.
Exactly. You didn't wait on the whole situation to come out. All right. So we got to stop doing that, you know. But a lot of times people will try to go after their own personal lust. Maybe they have a spirit of strife on them, right? They like to go back and forth. Maybe they want to express their own opinions, you know, and they feel that that's more important than yours. So they jump the gun in that way. All right. So you can tell what people's intentions are based off of how they're responding in the exact conversation. Okay. If you have someone who every time they finish, you know, you can't even finish your sentences. they talking over you every time you talk, and you can't get anything out. It's in their mind. They're like, okay, what can I say to combat what he just said? What can I say to show him, to discredit him or her? What can I say for this and this reason? That's what's in their mind instead of actually listening to what you're saying to solve the problem. Okay. And this isn't just talking about like an argument or a disagreement. This could be in just everyday conversation. You know, I know everybody knows somebody that you have a dialogue between two people and they just love to talk. They love to talk about themselves. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about your issue, but then they come and they say, well, you know, I had this and this going on in my life, and this happened, and this and this. Mm-hmm. They just continue to talk about themselves. Okay. You know, and that's draining for the other person because you're trying to vent, you know, to get a solution, and then they continue to talk about themselves. You know, those are the type of people that, for myself, I personally can't be around because those are like energy vampires. Mm-hmm. Those are people that take your energy, and it's always a one-sided relationship. Right. You know, it's listen to what I have, listen to the issues that I have, rather than let's go back and forth.
And imagine if you could listen to what that person's saying and just answer with, okay, I understand. Mm-hmm. And then the problem is solved and you move on rather than have to say a bunch of stuff
Right.
because you didn't listen fully. Just let them get it, whatever it is.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I understand. And they'll be like, oh, okay, you understand?
Right.
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
Simple as that.
It's simple. It's simple. And that's why I said earlier, you know, the things that are easy to do, they're easy, you know, but we rather go the hard way for whatever reason. All right, so let's go to the video real quick. Yeah, we got a couple of videos. He's gonna talk about listening. Okay, this is a TED Talk. And he's gonna talk about listening. This is William Ury. All right, so we'll go into it and then we'll talk about it after.
Listen. Why is it so important to listen? Let me tell you a story. Some years ago, I was in the country of Venezuela, serving as a third party between the government and the political opposition at a time of intense conflict, with a lot of people fearing a civil war. My colleague Francisco Diaz and I had an appointment with the president, Hugo Chavez, at 9 p.m. at the presidential palace. Finally, at midnight, we were ushered in to see the president, who had his entire cabinet arrayed behind him. And he asked me, so, Yuri, what do you think of the situation going on here? And I said, Mr. President, I've been talking to your ministers here and to the opposition, and I think you're making some progress. Progress? What do you mean, progress? He shouted. You're blind. You're not seeing all the dirty tricks those traitors are up to. And he leaned in very close to my face and proceeded to shout. What was I going to do? Part of me felt like defending myself naturally. But what good would it do for me to get into an argument with the president of Venezuela? How would that advance peace? So I just listened. I gave him my full attention. I listened to where he was coming from. And President Chavez was known, he was famous for making 8-hour speeches. But after 30 minutes of me just nodding and listening, I saw his shoulders slowly sag, and he said to me in a very weary tone of voice, so Yuri, what should I do? That's the sound of a human mind opening to listen. So I said, Mr. President, it's almost Christmas. The country needs a break. Last year, all the festivities were canceled because of the conflict. Why not propose a truce this time so that people can enjoy the holidays with their families, and after that, everybody will maybe be in a better mood to listen? He said, that's a great idea. I'm going to announce that in my next speech. His mood had completely shifted. How? Through the simple power of listening.
All right. So let's go into James chapter 2, verse 19, and I'm going to comment on that video based off of this scripture right here.
It's the book of James, chapter 1, verse 19. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath.
Okay, so when you're in a conversation with someone, your first reaction should not be to come back with a reply, to prove your point. That shouldn't be your first reaction. Your first response should be to be quick to hear, be quick to listen what the person is saying, and just as you saw in this video right here. So in the video, we showed how Hugo Chavez asked William Ury what he thought about the conflict. He gave his opinion, and Hugo Chavez started delaying him for 30 minutes. Imagine 30 minutes, you just getting
one-sided conversation.
One-sided conversation. All right? But instead, because he said it in the video, he said, I wanted to defend myself, but he didn't. He just sat back, he nodded, and he listened. And rather than interrupting him to get his point across, he listened. And guess what? That allowed him to lower his defense, Hugo Chavez. All right. So that's what we gotta do, man. And because of that, Hugo Chavez was able to receive what he was going to say with gladness. All right.
And then Yuri knew who he was dealing with.
Yep.
First, this is the president. He's got a certain level of power, and he's known for talking for a while. So when you know the type of person you're dealing with, it'll make listening easier. Okay, if this is a person that likes to talk a lot, hey, let me let them get in what they got to say so we can get this thing resolved. But if you don't know who you're dealing with, you don't know their characteristics, how they would react if you interrupt them, y'all might not get nowhere at all.
Exactly. And that's what's, it's very important for you to know who you're dealing with, just like you said. That's that Malachi 3:16, you know. They who fear the Lord spake often one to another. That's speaking often is not just in, hey, how you doing? It's also in understanding how that person likes to communicate, you know what I'm saying? And being able to know how to deal with them on that level, you know what I'm saying? Some people, you know, when it comes to, let's just say, when it comes to correction, some people need to be corrected in a certain type of way, you know what I'm saying? And you have to understand that based off of the person that you're dealing with. All right, so that's a great point. But that conversation was saved based off of the art of listening, you know, listening, waiting, and then responding when it was necessary. Okay, so we can't be quick to speak without listening, because that could actually spark that wrath. That could actually spark that anger, because you're giving that back and forth energy. It's like two sticks rubbing together. You know what I'm saying? When the two sticks rub together, then it's going to spark that fire. All right. So instead, you want to quench it, like it says in Sirach 28. You want to spit on that fire.
Right.
All right. And listening is one of the ways to do so. All right. Verse 20.
James chapter 1 and verse 20. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God.
All right. So it's a process, okay? Some people have short fuses, and that wrath is just going to come no matter what. But a lot of times, you know, it's caused by the lack of listening. You know what I mean? That wrath is caused because the other party is not listening to what the other person is saying, you know, and that frustration grows into that wrath, all right? And that can be prevented. You know, the fact that we don't listen to our brothers and sisters, it's unacceptable. And you could be causing them to sin, you know, based off of you not listening, okay? All right, so listening is loving your brother and sister is what I'm trying to say, all right? Now, how do we listen? Okay, let's go back to that video. Let's skip a little bit to 540. Let's see what he says on how we listen.
So how do we listen? Well, it turns out that we often take listening for granted as something easy and natural. But in fact, at least in my experience, real listening, genuine listening, is something that needs to be learned and practiced every day. In ordinary listening, we're hearing the words, and we're often thinking, where do I agree? Where do I disagree? What am I going to say in response? In other words, the focus is on us. In genuine listening, however, the spotlight moves to the other person. We put ourselves in their shoes. We tune into their wavelength. We listen from within their frame of reference, not just ours. And that's not easy. In genuine listening, we listen not just for what's being said, but for what's not being said. We listen not just to the words, but to what's behind the words. We listen for the underlying emotions and feelings, the underlying needs, what that person really needs or wants. Let me give you an example. About a year and a half ago, I was invited to ask a Brazilian entrepreneur.
All right, stop right there real quick. All right, so in this particular clip, what he's saying is that usually when we're in a conversation with somebody, we're looking to ourselves to find out how we're going to respond to that particular situation. whatever that person's saying. In our mind, we're like, okay, what do I say next? Okay, but what he's saying is that's not the way to be. You know, he's saying that you have to put yourself in their shoes in order to be able to have active listening and to listen effectively. So I want y'all to, you know, think about it. You know, put yourself in your last argument, your last conversation, you know, and your last discussion. Were you listening to respond, or were you listening to understand? All right. Were you listening to get your point across, or were you listening to find out that other person's perspective?
And this is a good game that, I mean, really anybody can play it, but husbands and wives can play it.
Man, yes.
Y'all can come up, you know, have a day where y'all just get together and y'all practice listening. Have your wife say a bunch of stuff, and you listen attentive to what she's saying, and then you try to write down what you heard her say.
Yes.
Don't show it to her yet. Just write down what you heard her say, then her do the same thing, and then y'all can recite it and see how well you listen. And if you don't listen well at first, don't take it bad, and wives don't get mad. Oh, you wasn't listening to me. Just keep trying it, and then over time you could, oh, well, dang, this time he actually said everything that I said. You were listening well.
Exactly.
This time she actually was able to write down everything I said. She was listening well, and imagine how far that would help your marriage,
Man.
especially when y'all have disagreements and stuff like that.
Oh man, most definitely. I'm glad you said that. That's definitely on point. You know, and that genuine listening, it's going to breed effective communication. As he talked about, you know, it puts the spotlight on the other person, just as you were saying. You put the spotlight on your husband or on your wife. Instead of trying to reply, you actually focus on listening, you know, and listening to the points that they say. All right. Okay, so let's go to the 7-minute mark in that video.
About a year and a half ago, I was invited to ask a Brazilian entrepreneur by the name of Abilio Diniz to help him because he was trapped in a titanic legal dispute with his French business partner over the control of Brazil's largest retailer. The Financial Times called it perhaps the biggest cross-continental boardroom showdown in recent history. It had gone on for 2.5 years, and it was immensely costly and stressful, not only to both parties, but to their families and the 150,000 employees of the company. So when I sat down with Abilio in his home, I listened to his story, and after that I had a question. I said, Abilio, help me understand here. What do you really want? And he said, well, I want the stock at a certain price. I want, you know, the company headquarters. I want the elimination of the non-compete clause. And he gave me a list. But I, as I listened, heard something deeper there that was unspoken. So I asked him, Abilio, you're a man who seems to have everything. What are these things really going to give you? What do you most want in your life? And he paused for a moment and thought about it. And finally he said, freedom. I want my freedom. I want to be free to pursue my business dreams, and I want to be free to spend time with my family. That was it. I was hearing the human being behind the words, not just the champion businessman. And so once we were clear about his deepest need, then the negotiation itself, while challenging, became a lot easier. And in 4 short days, my colleagues and I, by listening to the other side, were able to take this titanic dispute and resolve it with a settlement that left both sides highly satisfied. As Abilio, who became a friend in the process, later told me, I got everything I wanted, but most importantly, I got my life back. How did that happen? Through the simple power of listening.
All right. So he gives another example, another story as he was talking to someone, and he was given all these requests about what he wanted. I want this, I want that. And so as he was actively listening, he understood. He was like, why is he asking about getting all these things? There was something behind what he was saying. And that's what we got to realize in our conversation. We were talking about marriage. That's a good example, because everybody communicates differently.
Right.
You know, I'm not gonna say every man communicates like this, but in most cases, men communicate based off of logic, right? You know, men communicate based off of, okay, I see this happen, so this is how I'm gonna respond to it.
Right.
Women, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, it's based off of emotion. It's based off of we got all cases over here, but it's based off of emotion. It's based off of feeling. So I feel this way, you know, and so based off of the way that I feel, this is how I'm gonna respond to it. All right. So when you have those two different languages, because they basically, in terms of communication, they're two different languages. You cannot communicate you can't respond to emotion with logic.
Right.
And you can't respond to logic with emotion. Initially, you have to recognize what they're saying. If it's emotion, you got to recognize what that person is saying behind their words. You know what I'm saying? Like a woman may say, you don't spend enough time with me, right? All right, so they may say that, but then the man is like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm here every day, all day. You know what I'm saying? We watched TV together just yesterday. But what is she really saying behind that? She may be saying, you know, the way that what we're doing is not the emotional intimacy that I need. You know what I'm saying? There's something else that that I'm looking for.
Right. It's like you're here, but you're not here.
Exactly.
You know, we could be sitting next to each other. But
Right.
You may be a business guy, right?
Right.
And you're with your wife. Yeah, I'm watching this movie.
But
I
you
really
on the
don't want
phone.
to watch, but let me check my email.
There you go.
So she's like, you're not spending enough time with me.
Right.
You're not focused. Put your phone down. Put the work away.
Yes.
But logically, you're like, yeah, I'm there.
Right.
You know?
Right, exactly. And that's why it's important to do what William Ury did, is to ask questions. You got to ask those questions. He was like, what do you want? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you actually want out of, why are you asking for all of these things? And then once he asked that question, then he got to the root of the issue. The root of the issue was, I want to be free, you know? And so based off of that, now we can work on solving the problem.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so you got to be able to ask questions. Let's go to Mark chapter 10, verse 1. And we'll get an example based off of Christ and the disciples.
It's the book of Mark, chapter 10, verse 1. And he arose from thence, and cometh into the coast of Judea by the farther side of Jordan. And the people resorted unto him again, and as he was wont, he taught them again.
All right, so Christ is coming into Judea at this particular point. He has a gathering that's with him that he's actually teaching. So he's teaching the people, and then, as always, the disciples are with them. Read on.
And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? Tempting him.
All right, so now here come the Pharisees, okay? Once again, they're trying to entangle him in his speech, okay? So they asked him a question. Let's see how he responds to it.
And he answered and said unto them, what did Moses command you?
So notice this, though, all right? So when they asked him a question, Christ then comes back and asks another question right after that, right? So sometimes for effective communication, and this is a great tactic for a couple of reasons, sometimes to get more clarity, you have to ask another question to make sure that you fully understand what that person is asking you, what they mean. In this particular case, Christ already knew like where they were going. He already knew what their tactics were, that they were trying to entangle him in his speech. So he asked that question to put their thoughts out there first, right? To put that BS out there on Front Street.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So then he could give his answer in response to it. It was a chess move. Okay, so let's see. Read on.
And they said, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away.
So this is their answer, okay? Moses allowed us to write a bill of divorcement and to put the wives away. Now Christ has the upper hand, okay? He can show them the reasoning behind it and give his proof of statement after. All right, so let's see what happened. Read.
Verse 5. And Jesus answered and said unto them, For the hardness of your heart, he wrote you this precept.
He said, because of the hardness of your heart, Moses had to write that, okay? Because y'all were trying to put a woman away for every cause, as it says in Matthew, okay? And it never should have been like that, okay? Now, here comes the proof to validate that statement. Read.
But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female.
So Christ goes back before Moses, and he says, look, from the beginning, from the beginning, this is how I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show you that before Moses, what I said is true. So since the time God created male and female, read.
For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife.
So man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave unto his wife. All right, so let's go to the definition of cleave. Let's see what that says. That's a key word right there.
Cleave, verb, to adhere closely, stick, cling.
To adhere to closely stick to cling. So for, it says, for this cause shall man leave his father and mother and shall adhere to, stick closely to, cling to his wife. Read the next definition.
Definition 2, to remain faithful.
To remain faithful to. And then under it, it says to cleave to one's principles in spite of persecution. So to cleave to the laws of marriage. Okay. So man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to, shall stick to. Now let's go back up to that first definition, because it said to adhere to. Let's look at what adhere means.
Adhere, verb, number 1, to stay attached.
To stay attached to your wife or your husband. Read.
Stick fast.
To stick fast. Read.
Cleave.
Read.
Cling.
To cling to your husband or your wife. Read. Verse 2.
2, to be united by a molecular force acting in the area of contact, physics.
Right. So this is talking about the physics, but in a spiritual sense, you know, you're united. Go back to it. You're united by a spiritual force. All right, acting in the area of contact. Read.
Number 3, to be devoted in support or allegiance.
Okay, so you're devoted to your husband or wife.
Be attached as a follower or upholder.
Read.
Number 4, to hold closely or firmly.
Read.
Number 5, obsolete, to be consistent.
Even the obsolete says to be consistent. So it's telling you, so it's nowhere in those definitions where it's saying that it's temporary,
right,
you know, or the marriage is easily broken. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he's saying this from the beginning, it was this way. Read on. Verse 8.
Mark chapter 10, verse 8. And they twain shall be one flesh. So they are no more twain, but one flesh.
Right. So this is the thing. Christ used the exact words in the Bible, you know, that the Pharisees used, you know, the first 5 books of the Bible. He said that they are twain, and then they become one flesh. Okay. So read on.
Verse 9. What therefore God have joined together, let not man put asunder.
Read.
And in the house his disciples asked him again of the same matter.
Okay, so now they get in the house, okay, and the disciples, it's a more private setting. So now the disciples, hearing what had happened outside, now they ask Christ about the topic of marriage for a little bit more clarity. So they're like, hey, can you go over that again? I heard what you said, but let me get a better understanding. Yeah. So now notice what Christ does. Read.
Verse 11. And he said unto them, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her.
Mm-hmm.
And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery.
Right. So Christ goes over it again, but look at the way he went over it, though. this is another way to communicate effectively. You got to be brief, but then be specific. Okay, so Christ didn't explain the whole situation. He didn't say, okay, yeah, remember we was out there with the Pharisees. They asked me this. They came up on me. We was just over there teaching. He didn't go into the whole story because that wouldn't have been beneficial to them because they was there, you know. So he just was very brief and very specific. He said, look, in order to get this, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another, that person commits adultery. If a woman shall put away her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. That's the summary of everything that we went over right there. Okay? So in order to be effective in communication, we got to be brief but specific. Okay? Enough for another person to be able to understand what you're trying to say without having the whole story. Because we love to tell stories. We love to go into all these stories, but it's not beneficial to the person that's listening. Their eyes end up just going dead, glassing over, you know, and they don't even get the full understanding of what you were trying to say.
Because we don't really understand, you know, people's attention span.
Right.
Again, that goes with knowing who you're talking to. If you're talking to a 6-year-old, you can't sit there and explain something to a 6-year-old for probably longer than 10 minutes.
Exactly.
After the first 2 minutes, they forgot what you're talking about.
For sure.
Look at the butterfly that flew away. If you know how your wife is, you got to know who you're talking with, and that's why, you know, the elders going into, Christ just went and gave them what they needed to get.
Right.
So we can keep moving on.
Exactly. And like you said, that attention span is heavy because, what is it, 6 seconds now, Elder Josiah? So 6 seconds is the attention span of a human right now, which is less than a freaking goldfish.
Just makes it worse.
Exactly.
This thing we got right here makes it worse.
Right. So you only have a short period of time to explain something so that somebody gets it. And this is a lesson that's being taught by Christ right here with the disciples. Now, another thing that we should do when that's explained to us, somebody's brief, they're specific, a great tool is to also paraphrase what they said to you, right? Repeating back what that person said then helps them to understand that you understood what they said, and then it then verifies to yourself that you got it.
And you know who was great at that? Elder Uzziah.
There you go.
We would teach us on the street, and he's going into a topic. He would, you know, have them, hey, do you explain to me what I just said?
Right.
And then if they were able to explain to him what he went over, he was okay. We'll move on to the next point. Rather than, you know, you belaboring a point and they really didn't understand nothing you was talking about.
Exactly.
Shalom, family. Happy Sabbath. I was hiding from y'all, but brothers made it known I was here, so happy Sabbath, all praises. But no, it's funny that you brought that up, Shama, about paraphrasing and picking that up. You know where I learned that from? Arguments with my wife.
Hey, there you go.
And here's the reason why. A lot of times when I found myself in disagreements with my wife, you know, she might say something to me, and I already know how I want to answer. You know, and sometimes, you ever been with a woman where you can get the gist of where they're going in 5 seconds, but you have to sit there for 5 minutes and listen to the whole matter. Yep. So I would just be sitting and I'm like, damn, let's just cut to the chase of this, right? And I would have to learn in time that if I was just darting straight to my point, there was no admission that I ever understood or was listening to what was being said.
Right.
So a lot of times just to be able to come to a resolution on the matter before I even give my thought on what's being said, I'm going to say, okay, so if I gathered what you said correctly, what you said was this, to show, hey, I heard you. Now, whether or not I agree with you, that's something totally different. But I'm going to show you that I'm hearing you. And a lot of times that's very helpful because a lot of times, and I found, especially with my wife, sometimes women just want to know that you're at least trying to take into account what's being said before you come with your own thought or opinion. It's not even so much that, hey, we always have to be on the same page in terms of how we see a matter, but okay, well, at least when you tell me that you disagree, you can tell me why you disagree based upon what you've heard me say and go with. And then sometimes, every now and then, in truth, when I'm repeating the statement, I may come to find that maybe I heard it or interpreted it one way, but in actuality, she meant it this way, or it needs to be more clarification.
That's on point.
Definitely.
That's definitely on point, man. I'm glad you said that, and you really went into what I was just about to say.
I appreciate all the long years of arguing with you. Thank you, Ariel. It's been
All
very
praises.
helpful for the body. All
It
praise.
was beneficial at the end of the day. All praise to the Most High. But yeah, that's on point. When it comes to our wives as men, we gotta be able to validate their thoughts and their feelings in order to have that better communication. All right. Now, it's not okay to just dismiss your wife. You know what I'm saying? Even though sometimes you might not want to hear it, right? Because the scriptures say you got to love your neighbor as you love yourself. It says that men ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies.
But even if you think about it like this, because I had that issue where I'm in my mind, like, okay, I hear you talking, and I already know what I'm going to say, so I don't need to hear the rest of it. And a lot of times we really wouldn't get nowhere. But then when I did start listening, I was able to be clear and we were able to get through things.
Right.
But even with that, like, if you're going to shut that person down all the time, that can cause you to have a lot more arguments, believe it or not.
Sure.
Because they could be like, well, he didn't listen to me last time. I'm going to say what I got to say this time.
Right.
But if you're the type where you open up and listen, maybe she'll just be like, okay, he listened last time, we got through it, and, you'll be able to pick your battles. And she'll be like, okay, he heard me, I don't need to push that issue. Right. He shut it down this time, okay, I'm not going to just let it go. Because he's willing to hear me. But if you're never willing to hear her, she's going to buck. She's going to feel like, man, he don't want to hear me. Or it's going to get to the point where maybe she don't say nothing. And then there's a time where you want to communicate. You got nothing to say.
Yep. There you go.
I need this.
You
So
need that.
we can get past it. I ain't got nothing to say.
Right.
That causes problems on the end. So you got to be able to effectively communicate, listen,
Yes.
and then allow her, to say what she needs to say, so y'all can move past whatever the issue is.
Most definitely. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to be dismissed, you got to treat your wife like you would want someone to treat you.
Right.
At the end of the day. Now, after you listen to those thoughts, as the Lord of the house,
Right.
it's in your power to say, I hear what you're saying, or no, I don't agree with this. And that's fine. Now on the other end, as the wife, once he says I'm done, don't continue to push what you're trying to push, because that's disrespectful on the other end. All right. But at the end of the day, when someone feels a certain way, they feel it for a reason.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're not just, coming out of nowhere with it. It's important to them, so it's important that you acknowledge what they're feeling, even if you don't agree, like Elder Yazar said. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Repeat back what they're saying. Paraphrase it. Now, this is how I feel. This is my perspective on it. That's how you effectively communicate.
And the reason why it's good to repeat back what they're saying, so that you personally know what was said. Because you ever been talking to somebody, and then y'all had that, conversation or whatever, and then weeks later come and they was like, yeah, when we was talking, you said this, and remember when I said that, and you like, I don't remember that. Right. And then you look like because you probably did say that, or she probably did say that, and now you can't recall. I like to recall conversations so you can't go back and say I said anything that I didn't say, or that you can say you said something that I know you didn't say. We can remember this. You want to be able to call these conversations to remembrance. Be like, no, when I said this, you said that.
Exactly, because that's how people will get over on you.
Yep.
They'll do it every time, and they'll, like I said, this is it's a war, man. You know what I'm saying? And so people will use that to their benefit. You know what I'm saying? Oh, he don't really be listening like that, so I can say whatever. You know what I'm saying? Or and then I could come back to him and he don't have no defense because he can't recall what was said. All right. So let's get another example. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 3. Go ahead, before we go into this one.
All right. So what you're saying is very key and crucial. And, like Uzziah, we learn a lot from our interactions with our wives. But, as we work together as brothers, sisters, and things like that, that's where you're going to learn a lot from. And it really goes a long way if both sides, both people who are communicating are committed to having more effective communication. So, like, one thing that I like to say a lot is it's both the sender and the receiver's job to make sure the communication was effective. So if I'm trying to effectively communicate with you, Yachin, and you are like, man, I ain't trying to hear nothing you got to say, it's going to be a failure on both sides either way it go. But like recently, with one of my team members here within the church, I had a conversation. And what drove the conversation to have to be had is initially there was a conversation where I cut off the speech. Now, I had a reason why, but it came off a certain way and made somebody feel like I wasn't listening. So then in the follow-up conversation, I just let it go. Speak the whole time, say everything that you got to say. And then in return, then I, just like you said, was able to repeat back what you said. And then I may have had some rebuttals, but it was based on what was said to me first. It wasn't, me just giving what I had already put together. Right. It was based off what was said to me in the fact that I was listening. And at the end of it, it was a great conversation that everybody walked away from feeling better from. At least that's my understanding of it, right? That now we're able to progress and move forward and continue, as opposed to now we leave with people still feeling some type of way at the end of it.
Most definitely. And when you respond that way, it's like you're tearing down that wall. You allow it's a softer answer, you know what I'm saying? To allow people to say, okay, he did hear what I said. Okay, that's a step. That's good. And then now you being able to provide your standpoint or your side of things is more received on their end now, because they heard that you heard them. So that's important, man. That breaks down that wall of non-communication, so you guys can communicate effectively. All right.
One point with that as well, like, even as parents, we got to be able to effectively communicate and teach our children how to communicate.
Bring it out.
Because they sit and they watch how we communicate with other adults, and then they sit and watch how we communicate with them, especially as they get older. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is, not you're just telling them what to do and just do it. We're talking back and forth and you're arguing with me. No, it's, you're teaching them different lessons, and then you allow them to say, okay, explain to me what I just said. Mm-hmm. Explain to me why I told you why I said what I said. Why, so they can understand how to reason and then understand how to actually communicate with others. Because if we just get into the point where it's like our parents, just because I said so, go. Right. You know what I'm saying? And there's never any learning or any teaching, they're going to learn how to respond the same way.
Exactly. And you gotta teach the children when they're young, mm-hmm. And when they grow old, they're not going to depart from it. Right. It starts at a young age. Right. Just as an example, how some adults talk to kids in baby language and mm-hmm. stuff like that. Like, yeah, why? Right. That's not how you actually talk. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, they need to be learning from the very beginning how to talk, and mm-hmm. you using words that they may not know right now, you know what I'm saying? But in conversation, then they'll start to pick it up, right, because you're using it on an everyday basis. So it's the same when it comes to stuff like that. When teaching people how to, kids how to communicate, you have to start at a young age.
Absolutely.
All praises. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16. Let's get an example once again about effective listening.
1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16. Then came there 2 women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, mm-hmm. and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also. and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house.
Read.
And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it.
Mm-hmm.
And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thy handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom.
Read.
And when I rose in the morning, I gave my child suck. Behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear.
So she thought about it. She was like, this is not my child. Read.
And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son.
Uh-huh.
And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son.
Mm-hmm.
Thus they spake before the king.
Read.
Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living.
So, we have a situation here where one woman is like, no, this is my son that lives, and that her son is the dead one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the other woman saying, no, that's my son. That is her dead son. Okay, so we have an issue here. How is it going to be solved? Read.
Verse 24, And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king.
Read.
And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other.
Read on.
Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son, and she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it.
So you had one woman who was like, once he said, look, bring me a sword, we just going to divide this child in half and give one half to one and one half to the other. One of the women said, nah, don't do that. Just give it to her. Give the child to her. Then you had the other woman that said, okay, well, do it. All right, read on.
Verse 27, Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof.
So they gave the child to the woman who said, don't do it. Just give her the child, right? Read.
And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment.
Okay, so now Solomon becomes the king of Israel, and he's put into the situation where he's got to figure out the best plan of action. He's got to figure out how to judge this matter with these two women and the baby that they're fighting over, okay? So notice the way that he does it, though. The woman tells the whole story. There's no interruption whatsoever. He just listens to the whole story. He didn't interrupt. He wanted to get the full understanding of what actually happened, okay? Because what that did was that allowed him to be able to make the right judgment call and figure out who was the actual mother of the child. Okay, so he made that judgment call. When he made the judgment call, the whole nation saw that the wisdom of God was actually upon him. But he wouldn't have been able to display that wisdom if it wasn't for the listening aspect of it.
Right.
He wouldn't have been able to show the nation that, okay, God has given me this gift to be able to judge matters properly. Okay. And that's the thing, because many of us want to hold certain positions. We want to, be well respected within the church, just like King Solomon was, in the midst of his nation at that time, for example. But look at what got him that respect. What got him the respect is the ability to judge properly. And the judgment was highly respected, but it came from the ability to listen first, and then be able to make the proper judgment call. All right. So that's another example that we need to follow in terms of listening and effective and active listening. Okay. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. Because we need to learn not only how to listen, but we need to learn how to speak the right way to people. Okay. That's also a way to have effective communication, because a lot of times arguments pop off. Different things happen because we don't know how to speak to one another. You know what I'm saying? We so used to just saying, well, this is just how I am,
Saying.
Yeah, that's the magic saying to justify some wickedness.
You gonna hear my mouth. This is how
Yeah, this is just how I am.
Right.
Okay, but that's not the way we gotta be, man. We gotta change that. We gotta reform our minds. All right, this is one way we do it. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1.
Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger.
All praises. So a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Okay, so when you're able to speak in a way that won't spark a fire, but actually puts it out, puts out the wrath that was actually coming for you, that's the way that you're supposed to speak. But if you do the opposite, if you stir up those words, then guess what? You just got to receive whatever's going to happen after that, because that's your fault. Go ahead.
And it's good knowing, again, that person you're dealing with. Because when it says the last part is stir up anger,
yes,
the anger's there. You put those words in that pot and you stirred it up, and now that you allowing that person to lash out. Exactly. Which, again, like you said earlier in the class, you could do things that cause another person to sin. Scripture say be angry and sin not. But if you know a person deals with a certain type of anger where they're rash with their speech, they can say anything, and you got to address this person. Well, maybe I should use soft answers for love of my neighbor to get the point across, and then so he don't lash out.
Exactly. You got to know who you dealing with. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody has different spirits. You know what I'm saying? And once again, that's that Malachi 3:16 of knowing who you're talking to, knowing who you're communicating with. All right. So when we get in these type of situations, things are going to happen. We're going to get emotional. We're going to feel a certain type of way about the things that happen that may have been said or may have been done to you. And that's okay. That's okay if you feel a certain way. If you have certain emotions towards what somebody said to you that got you angry, for instance. The thing is that because you can't control those feelings. You know what I'm saying? Like if I call you a name, you're gonna feel a certain type of way about it. And you can't control that. But what you can control is letting those emotions and those feelings dictate your next move. Dictate how you operate after that. Okay? And so we can't let the way that someone speaks to us then dictate how we respond to them after. You know, because the scriptures say, render not evil for evil.
But brothers are good at that. Well, we got to feel like we're men, right? So you could put yourself in a situation where you get hurt and you're like, I'm not finna cry. You're going to try your hardest to keep them tears back. Ooh, it hurt. Right. But I'm not finna cry in front of all these brothers. Right. But then when it comes to anger and all these other things, we don't hold back that emotion. Nah. Because
let it flow.
It's supposed to be macho to show your anger.
Right.
But if we think in the context to the commandments, we got to be able to say, nah, I got to be able to rule my spirit, even though that person did say something that hurt my feelings.
Yep.
I can't lash out like that.
Exactly. That's a great point. Most definitely. So we gotta really focus and concentrate on giving that soft answer, especially to people that we know, like you said, are going to respond in a certain type of way. I had a brother that I was just going to the store, walking in the store. A brother was walking past, and I was like, I'm gonna speak to this brother. You know what I'm saying? And I said, hey, what's up, brother? Before I could actually get it out, he was like, what the you looking at? Like he was, I don't know what he was on. I don't know what he was on that day. But I was like, whoa, it took me back because I was like, yo, I'm just trying to speak. But, I did the soft answer. I said, I'm just admiring a king that looked like me. You know what I'm saying? And he was like, that took him back. He didn't know what to say after that. That soft answer actually softened how he came at me after that. Because then we actually had a conversation after that. We started talking about the scriptures, started talking about kings and stuff like that. So that's just an example of how that soft answer can help you in a situation.
I had a similar situation, way back when I worked at the prison. It was a day where I didn't want to be at work. I was working third shift. I was just upset that day. There was a lot going on. So the cell block I was working on had 3 rows. So it's 3 different levels. So the kitchen inmates were coming out. It's probably like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So inmate was taking his time, and I'm like, hey, come on. So I already had an attitude. He had an attitude about whatever. So I go up on the 3rd row, and we kind of had words. But then I had to sit there and think about where I was at. Okay, I'm on the 3rd row. I had to think about who I was talking to. Yes. because it was a Hispanic dude and he was kind of fat. It was a big dude. So I was like, let me think wisely in this situation. Is me being macho, trying to pull my rank, really viable in this situation? Mm-hmm. So I kind of changed my tone and spoke to him differently. And then I was like, just give me your ID and stuff like that. And he gave it to me or whatever. He walked off. And we went to the end of the cell block. He talked to his homeboy or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then he walked off and went downstairs. And as I was walking by, he was like, hey, boss, you know what I'm saying? Let me talk to you real quick. Don't write him up. He's going through a lot, blah, 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 whatever. And like, all right, whatever. But then I went down there and we were able to talk it out. And he talked to me and I talked to him. He was like, it was my bad. I shouldn't have did that. And I was like, it is what it is. Let's just move forward. Right. But in that whole thing, if I would have gave him a hard answer or been macho, he could have just snapped and it could have been different.
Could have threw you off that third row.
Could have. So
yeah, man, that's another great example right there. That soft answer will definitely turn away that wrath. And I love that example because you realize who you were talking to, you realize where you were at, and what could happen if you, stirred up that anger that wrath. So all praises, all praises. So the scriptures tell us in Romans, it says that if your enemy hunger, feed him. Mm-hmm. It says, if he thirsts, give him drink. In doing so, you heap coals upon his head. All right. So what you do is you actually make the other person realize what they're doing. Right. You make them understand that their reaction is silly. Okay. And that's kind of like what happened with King David and Saul, when he cut off his garment. Right. You know what I'm saying? That was a soft response compared to Saul's psychotic behavior at the time. In fact, that's the exact way that we should be behaving right now. Mm-hmm. And in this modern day. Okay. But it's crazy because remember that David never called him a name. He said, look, I'm dealing with the Lord's anointed. He always said that throughout that whole issue, even though Saul was trying to kill him. And that is a lesson that must be learned and it must be taught modern day. All right. So let's go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. Christ said the same thing.
So book of Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy.
All right. So it's been said, love your neighbor. And it's been said to hate your enemy. Love your neighbor. That was said in old times. The hate your enemy goes into the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that he was mentioning up a couple of verses. So that goes back into Deuteronomy 19. If you hate your neighbor, you kill him, you flee to that refuge city. All right. And then the elders have to find you, bring you back, and kill you. That's the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So let's see how Christ responds to how he expounds on this. All right, read on.
But I say unto you, love your enemies.
He said, love your enemies. Read.
Bless them that curse you.
Uh-huh.
Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
Okay, so instead of hating our enemies and even wishing death on them, we're supposed to love them. We're supposed to bless them. Okay, we're supposed to do good to them that hate us. All right, just like David did with Saul. Okay, pray for them that use us and persecute us. Okay, that's what our Messiah said. That's what's in the scriptures right there. Okay, and that's what I love about Christ, though, because he did what I call leading from the front. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? He didn't just talk it. He actually lived it, in a situation where he was at his lowest and at his most vulnerable stage of his life, he did the same thing. And we're going to get it in this next scripture. Go ahead.
And this is why we have a lot of issues in congregations, is because we don't apply this scripture. We forget about this. You come into the church and you think that everything is going to be rosy, but you got to be able to apply what Christ just said right here. Right. You got to be able to bless those that curse you. So obviously there's going to be somebody in the congregation that's going to have an ill will towards you. But in your walk, in your repentance, you got to be able to have a level of maturation to where you could say, I just send blessings upon you, King, right. God, right. Daughter of Sarah. I don't wish nothing evil on you. Exactly. It's got to show your level of growth. That's why Christ said, in that day, Many going to say to me, Lord, 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 have I prophesied, done many wonderful works? And I'm going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. Why? Because you weren't able to apply these scriptures. You had the fringes, you had the border of blue, you had the head wraps, you was on the Sabbath. But when you had all that and God sent that spirit in there to curse you, you just went right along and was a nigga and showed wrath and did all that stuff. Right. And you failed the test.
Exactly, and that's exactly what it is. It's a test, and we go so hard with trying to figure out these deep dark parables and these scriptures about the feathers and all of that. Nah, man, listen, we gotta do we gotta do this,
right?
In terms of dealing with our brothers and sisters, man. Like, this is where the real test comes in. All right, so let's get Luke chapter 23, verse 33. As I was saying before, Christ led from the front. It wasn't that he was just saying, hey, do this, as the Pharisees said, do this, and then they're not doing it. They were hypocritical. Christ didn't do that. He led from the front. He said, look, I told you to love your enemies. Guess what? I'm going to do the same thing. I told you to pray for the people that use you and persecute you. I'm going to do the same thing. And he did it in his lowest point. Read this.
This is the book of Luke, chapter 23, verse 33. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left.
So you had them bring Christ to Calvary, okay? This is where he was going to get crucified. He put them between two criminals, all right? Read.
Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots.
Read.
And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them derided him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he be Christ, the chosen of God.
So the people, when it says the people, it's talking about our people. The people of Israel stood looking on. What did they do? It says the rulers of not of Rome, but of our people, the scribes, the Pharisees, etc. These were the people that said, look, if he's anointed, if he's the chosen of God, let him save himself. This is what they said while Christ was on the cross. Our people. Read.
Verse 36. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar.
Read.
And saying, If thou be the king of the Jews, save thyself.
So this is the man that committed no sin whatsoever. And remember what Pilate said. Pilate was like, look, I see no fault in this man. Right. This was another nation that said that. Okay? But guess what our people said? Crucify him, crucify him. All right? So this is all due to our people's hatred towards our Messiah, okay? But not only that, they laughed at him. They mocked him when he was at his weakest point, okay? Now let's go back up to verse 34. Read this.
Luke chapter 23, verse 34. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Despite all of that happened to Christ in that moment, in his most vulnerable and his weakest point, he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. So he prayed for the people that persecuted him. He prayed for the people that used him, just like he said in the previous scripture. Okay? So despite the hatred that was displayed amongst our people, he still prayed for them. Okay? How many of us can do that? How many of us can do that? Knowing that someone's wrong, knowing that the words that came out of their mouth may be slanderous, maybe something that destroys our name, all right? It destroys our reputation. It could be lies, okay? But despite that, we still ask the Father to forgive them because they know not what they do.
Hey, Elder, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of Israel can't do that.
Man, bring it out.
And you know why it's known that they can't do that? Because we're so quick to call somebody the two-thirds for their ignorance or for how they treat us. Mm-hmm. Oh, you the two-thirds, you wicked. That's you wishing judgment on them.
Exactly.
And we got to get out of that spirit, and we've got to be able to pray for them. We've got to be able to say, okay, yeah, you and your ignorance, and what you're saying is upsetting me. Mm-hmm. But I would pray you not the two-thirds. Okay. I would pray that you repent. I would pray that the Most High put the Spirit on you to get yourself right.
All praises.
So, a lot of people is not there. A lot of us are not there. We got to check our spirits because, again, these are the things we're going to be judged based on when we stand before Christ.
Right.
Yes, we got to keep the Sabbath. Yes, we got to keep the holy days, fringes, the dietary, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you do that because the scribes and Pharisees were doing that, but at the end of the day, they didn't love their people the way they were supposed to.
Exactly.
So-
Exactly. Great point. And you know why we don't do that is because we lack discipline. We lack the discipline to be able to control our emotions in that way and to just be like, you know what? I'm going to just eat that and I'm going to pray for the brother. I'm going to pray for the sister.
I had to do that the other day. So we was in the Facebook group, and people was putting, "Hey, what book should we read?" To help black people.
Oh, man.
So,
I think I saw. I didn't.
Hey,
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
the Bible.
Right.
Some people liked it, other people didn't, and they had their comments or whatever. And it wasn't in the spirit of I'm going back and forth with you. It was the spirit, okay, let me just educate the people that's on the post and leave it at that. But I had to use my discernment at that point and say, okay, I put what I put. I'm done.
Right.
I don't need to say anything else. Let you say what you're gonna say. And the brother had a slick comment or whatever, but I didn't want him to take me to that level where it made me look foolish. Exactly. It seemed like it was combative, two brothers going back and forth on something that's supposed to be positive.
Yep.
It wasn't profitable. Just okay, I left it there, and I could have took offense at what he said about God, but at the end of the day, I pray that you change your spirit. I pray that you get yourself right. Lord's will we meet in the kingdom if you repent.
Exactly. And what we got to realize is that things like that, they show where our mind's at, but it also it sheds a bad light on what we're trying to do. You know what I'm saying? So if you can't control yourself, if you say you love the truth so much, you love God so much, you love the Bible so much, you love your people so much, but yet you can't control your emotions enough to not post something, or not say something to a brother that could shed a bad light on this truth, shed a bad light on your people, then you a liar. Because you just plain and simple, because if you did love your people, it wouldn't be no problem to do so. Or you would actively work on trying to improve yourself on a daily basis. All right. So when you read scriptures like this, Father, forgive them because they know not what they do. You got to realize, though, that Christ did this. He was crucified, and he then sat on the right hand of the Father, right? And after that, now Christ is making intercession for you to God, right? Despite the fact that all of this was said to him. The whole nation was against him. That's another level, man.
It's heavy, Elder. He's at his point of about to die for something he didn't do. And again, he has the spirit enough to make intercession for you. That's why I'm saying and none of us are gonna be able to stand for Christ and make no excuses, because you ain't at the point where you about to die. Half of the time we get mad because you forgot to give me my unleavened bread. You didn't serve the plate the way I wanted it served. You know what I'm saying? You didn't shalom me the way I want. I like to be shalom.
Right.
So therefore, I got something against you. Come on, man.
It'd be minor stuff,
Minor
man.
stuff.
Minor stuff. But, like you said, you're going to have to answer in the day of judgment, But these are the lessons that we need to internalize. These scriptures like this, we need to internalize them and say, look, I got to start to emulate these things. I got to start to practice these things because this is the perfect example that I need to follow. All right. So let's go to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29.
It's the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth.
It says, let some corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth.
Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth.
Read on.
But that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers.
Okay, so there should be no corrupt communication that comes out of our mouth, all right? Nothing that could be considered wicked, all right? And also those things that aren't edifying to the people that are actually listening to you, all right? Your speech is always supposed to minister grace unto the people that's listening, all right? Why? Because it's supposed to get them to repent. It's supposed to get them to change. How are you going to get somebody to change when your words, when your communication is still worldly? All right? You can't do it because then you will be found a hypocrite. All right, read verse 30.
Verse 30. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption.
Read.
Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice.
Okay, so in our conversation with one another, this is what we have to do. We got to purge out those specific spirits out of our spirit. Okay, this bitterness amongst each other for a brother or sister. You know, there's people out there that are genuinely hurt. You know what I'm saying? That had somebody treat them a certain way. Trust me, we know. You know what I mean? But you're not justified. I mean, you're justified to feel the way that you do, but don't allow yourself to be bitter, though. Don't allow yourself to be bitter, because what that does is that turns into wrath, that turns into anger, that turns into hatred then for your brother or your sister. Now, all of a sudden, now you start speaking evil things towards that person now. And maybe worse, maybe you do something because that bitterness has grown into something that you can't control. You know, and what Satan will do is he'll build on these spirits until it gets that serious, you know. So you want to cut it off from the foundation so it doesn't grow into something that you can't control. Because they'll say, you know how they say, Jesus take the will, Satan will take the will. Satan will take your will and you know, put you in a ditch.
And then we've seen a lot of this on social media. You know, like you said, people may have been wronged in whatever situation they were in. And there's a point where they were bitter because of what was done to them. And like you said, they didn't correct it. And then you see their wrath. You see their anger. You see clamor. They start getting other people involved in the talking. Yeah. Then it becomes evil speaking, because now the scriptures is gone away and you ain't really coming for no solution. It's let me make a meme of you. Let me talk evil of you. Let me make a joke of you. Let me get everybody in on it. And it can't be like that. You got to, okay, if you've been done wrong, let me check my spirit. If I do have a sense of bitterness coming into me, let me get that stuff right. Because now it's not about that other person. It's about me.
Right. Most definitely. And you're right about that, because what happened is, you know, you'll go over and over, you know, you'll have these people talking crap, saying this, saying that, and it gets to a point where you're like, why are we even doing this anymore? Right. You know, you can't even remember the actual reason that it popped off like that. Right. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, that's that youthful lust that we have. But at the end of the day, you know what, once again, what this really comes down to is that self-discipline. All right. So the discipline to feel those emotions, then take that energy and say, what do I do with this? You know, take the energy, and instead of rendering that evil for evil, like we'll talking about not doing, let me provide a soft answer now. Let me pray for the brother. Okay. Let me do something to shift that anger into something positive.
Right. You know how people like movies, and you know, in my house we watch a lot of X-Men. The thing about the X-Men is a lot of them were given powers. They had powers, that energy, but they could decide to use that energy for good, or they could decide to use the energy for bad. Right. So like you're saying, even when it comes to our walking this truth, when you got that energy, decide if you're going to use it for good or use it for bad, because it can have a lasting effect down the line. Exactly,
and that's what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the tongue. You know, the tongue is a weapon. It can be used for good or for evil, for life or for death. It just depends on what you decide to use it for. You know, that's why we went into those negative characteristics, and now we're going into the positive things that we need to be doing to, have that effective communication like we've been talking about. All right, but so when we talk about bitterness, once again, we talk about anger, we talk about wrath. We also have to make sure we understand that if you have an issue with a brother or sister, you got to let them know immediately. Like, don't hold on to that bitterness that you have, you know, because it's going to, like we said, begin to build. If it's not addressed, then it's going to grow 10 times the size of what it was before. And then now you can't control it. Now you blacking out. All right. And that's why we got scriptures like Matthew 18, you know what I'm saying? To be able to talk to your brother and tackle an issue with the brother or sister before it grows to something that you can't control.
And even with that, it's two ways.
Yes.
Because like I went over last week in Iron Sharpened Iron, when it came to Matthew 18, if you don't allow a person to actually apply it the proper way, you can be putting a hindrance to them. So we gotta allow that person, to be able to speak to us, so they don't get to that level of bitterness.
Right.
Because if they feel like, oh, I can't talk to that person, we've seen the result of that.
Yes.
You feel like you can't talk to that person, they're untouchable, and now you can never resolve the issue. Or by the time that person does let you resolve the issue, you're too bitter to even get past it, and more damage has been done. So
Exactly. It's not only looking out for yourself; it's looking out for your brothers and sisters as well. That's what this whole walk is about. You know what I'm saying? All right. So let's go to verse 32.
Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. And be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, have forgiven you.
All right, so that's the mindset right there. You got to be kind to one another, tenderhearted, be caring towards one another, forgive one another. Why? Because the Father forgave us based off of Christ's sacrifice. So why would we not do that to our brother and sister? Okay, let's go to James 3. Couple more scriptures.
It's the book of James, chapter 3,
Verse 8.
and verse 8. But the tongue can no man tame. It is unruly evil, full of deadly poison.
So the tongue is very, very dangerous, as we have gone through this whole class. All right. It says no man can tame it, because there's going to be things, and the scriptures talk about us, the tongue doing dangerous things, and it's like, it's not on purpose, that we may say or certain things. It's just that, certain things happen and we come out with it and it sounds bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we got to understand that the tongue is very, very difficult to tame. But that doesn't mean that we don't do it. That doesn't mean that we don't try to get ourselves together. And what we need to do is to meditate on the scriptures, meditate on what they say, practice it over and over again so that it becomes who we are. All right, read.
But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God.
So with the tongue, we'll bless God. We'll say, oh, praise, all praises to the Most High God. And then right after that, we'll say, I can't stand that. We'll do that.
That's how they do it, with his black skin
Right.
and his black lips.
Right. That look just like the Father.
Just like God.
That's crazy. And we're made, like you were saying, after the similitude of God. Read on.
Verse 10. Out of the same mouth proceeded blessings and curses. My brethren, these things ought not so to be.
So we should not be that way. We should not be that way where we're blessing somebody, we're praying for somebody, and then we get right out of that situation. Now we're talking about somebody. Now we're cursing somebody. Now we're speaking evil of that person. It says, my brethren, these things ought not to be this way. Read.
Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter?
So if you have a fountain, are you going to have both sweet water and bitter water that comes out of that fountain at the same time? No, it's not going to happen. It's going to be one or the other. All right. Let's jump down to verse 13.
Verse 13. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom.
So the people that are looked as wise and have knowledge among us are the people that have good conversation amongst us. Okay? And you see that based off of the works, based off of their actions, based off of the words that they speak, you can tell that that person is wise. But if you have people who are cursing people and then blessing people at the same time, then you see, okay, this person isn't as wise as they claim to be. This person needs some help, needs some work.
I saw somebody do that the other day on Facebook. But the way they cleaned up, oh, I'm not talking about you righteous in Israel. But open the video, they just went off, and you like, whoa, you talking about everybody? Sound like you talking about everybody. And they cleaned it up. Oh, I'm not talking about you righteous Israelite.
Gotta be careful, man. Gotta be careful.
Are we supposed to have love and care for all our people?
Right. Read on.
Verse 14. But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth.
Because having bitter envy and strife in your heart and your mind, that's nothing to glory over. That's nothing to be proud over right there. That's a sickness. And you need to be healed from that. All right, read on.
This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish.
This is not something that's spiritual. This is something that's earthly. This is something that is worldly. All right, and we got to purge our spirits from that. Okay, read on.
For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work.
Right, and that's really what I was talking about earlier, is that you can understand where the wisdom comes from. You can understand if somebody has wisdom, if they're studying, if they're applying what they're reading based off of how they talk, based off of how they act. You can see it. Before you speak, before you say something, you got to think about that thing. Okay, is this profitable to the people? Is this going to be edifying to the people, or am I going to be doing more damage or more hurt than good? You got to think about those things. All right. Matthew chapter 12, verse. Go ahead.
Hot topic.
I got to throw this quick piece in here. What the elders been going over as far as a soft answer and just the spirit of thinking before you speak is very important. And this all goes into really the law and how we deal with each other in a civilized way. That there should be a moral and civil code that we have as a nation in terms of how we receive one another. And I think that that's clear. At the same time, I think there's another side of that coin. We live in a world that's very politically correct. We live in a world that thrives off of cancel culture. And we live in a world where, anything that you say can and will be used against you, in the court of law. And, this creates problems because we live in a world where everybody gets a trophy. So, if you find yourself in a marriage or, a parent-child relationship or a congregation or your workplace, a sports team, any environment where there are two or more people, and those two or more people are having to work together towards a common goal, inevitably, there's going to be certain things that the other person needs to be held accountable on to get to the next level, and vice versa. If we operate in the spirit of, oh, well, you know what, I just can't say this because, everybody gets a trophy, so I can't acknowledge, this fault or this error, that's going to be very detrimental to us building as a nation, and we ought not to use the softness as a card just because someone is telling us the truth about ourselves that we know in our heart of hearts to be true, right. But because of the fact that we're so soft and so sensitive, we don't want to hear it. I always say this. If you don't want to hear something, why don't you do it so nobody else has to say it? If we're playing on a basketball team and the last 10 shots you put up, 8 of them are air balls, why do I have to then come and be like, yo, bruh, you've been airballing. Sit on the bench, bruh. You know what I mean? Not everybody's the star. why do I then have to become the bad guy because I'm acknowledging that not everybody's the star? We're looking at the scoreboard. We're down by 50 freaking points. Right. We're going to lose. And when you look at a lot of these sports documentaries amongst teams, they'll always show, whenever these teams were actually trying to get to the championship, there were some hard discussions that needed to be had amongst the players, whether it be in the locker room or during the game, to say, here's what we got to get. I say all that to say, Israel, and I mean this very honestly and very sincerely, and I'm going to wrap up after this. One of my personal struggles as a brother in Israel is, I like to be focused on growth and progress, but I don't always feel like the same growth or improvement that I know that I'm on, I can actually impart that to somebody else. And that bothers me because if my brother or sister is hurting and they're stagnant, I want them to grow the same way that others are growing. But if they cannot be told anything because, any little thing you say is going to be an issue, then what do you do? And we're going to hurt each other in that manner if there cannot be any honest conversation. I mean, my mic.
All praises. Yep. I'm glad you said that, and that's something that that I was gonna say as well. Because there's a balance, right? It's not just that. Okay, you speak this so softly every single time. There's always balance in the scriptures. Jude 1, 22 and 23 talks about some you have compassion, making a difference, right. And then there's others you say with fear, pulling them out the fire. There's some people that, like people that know me, everybody in this room know if you tell me that I did something wrong, you don't have to yell at me. You could just say, you did this, this, and this. I'm going to be like, okay, bet. I'm going to change, right? But other people aren't like that. Other people, you almost want to Nehemiah them and put hands on them, because of their rebelliousness, because they don't see that they're actually hurting themselves and hurting the nation rather than helping. Some people, you have to light a fire under them like that. So there is that balance between the two. So I'm glad that you brought that up. All praises. Let's go to Matthew chapter 12, verse 34.
It's the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 34. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh.
So this is going back right with what was said in James. You can't have, a fountain that's bringing forth sweet water as well as bitter at the same time. How can you claim to be good, but you're speaking evil? It's not possible, okay? Because what's in your mind, what's in your heart, that's what's going to come out of your mouth. All right, read.
A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things.
So if you're a good man, then good things are going to come out of your mouth. Read.
And an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things.
Likewise the evil man. Read.
But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment.
So that's why we're saying it's very important for you to think about what's being said prior to it coming out of your mouth, because every word that you speak, every word that somebody hears is going to affect them in a certain way, whether it's positive or negative. So every word that you speak you're going to have to give account of it in the day of judgment. Christ is going to hold you accountable. And he's going to say, remember you said this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. Remember you treated this person this way, and this way. I never knew you. Depart from me.
And when it talks about that good treasure, those are the things stored away in your mind. Mm-hmm. So like you went over way in the beginning of the class, people have gone through multiple days of atonement, but they're holding on to something. Instead of replacing that evil thought with something positive about that person, let me think about a good memory. Let me think about the good times we've had. Let me think about a person's good characteristics. So that once that's stored in your mind and you do have to speak to somebody, that's the first thing that comes to your mind, rather than I keep harping on the fact when this person lied to me or when they stole from me. So then when we had that conversation, I'm calling them a thief and all kind of crazy stuff, and I'm offending them because that was the treasure I stored in my mind.
Exactly. Once again, don't let your emotions and your feelings dictate how you act, how you move. It's okay to feel a certain way, but don't let that be make that how you react to certain people. Don't let that happen. All right, read on. 37.
Verse 37. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned.
So you gotta choose a side. You gotta choose a side. Which the tongue is a weapon, as we said. But how are you gonna use it? Are you going to use it for good so that you be justified in your sayings because you're speaking and behaving in the way the scriptures command you to? Or are you going to be condemned based off of the words that you speak? It's completely up to you. All right. So with that being said, that's the end of the class. All praise to the Most High. I hope y'all got something from it.